At the Haas Financial Group, we philosophically believe that everyone needs a financial plan, and when to start that planning is something we want to talk about today. When would someone or a couple be ready? What questions would they be asking? And then how can a financial planner or financial planners, like those at the Haas Financial Group, how can they help? So while every client has unique circumstances, they're going to be different. Hence, our advice is a little more personalized and unique. We certainly know that we hear similar questions, and the blueprint for starting one's financial plan is absolutely similar from person to person and couple to couple. So we'd like to share today how we would help someone start the financial planning process through an example, the Rosen family. So Adam, join me in this. Let's share who they are, this example. What are their typical goals? What are their typical pain points? And certainly then, how can we help them?
We call this, our accumulators, right? Maybe it's a younger family, or maybe it's someone who now is starting to have more resources, feel more secure in their earning power, have some excess cash flow beyond just, paying the bills, and now are trying to figure out, how do I efficiently allocate these resources to my several goals that are kind of competing for resources all at the same time. So whether that's, upgrading the home to something bigger to fit the family, or it's saving for kids' education. Meanwhile, I'm trying to save for my own retirement at some point here in the future. Maybe there's still student loan debt that also feels like it needs to get paid off as a priority. It's all of these competing goals that we want to help them allocate their resources in an efficient way.
I think from a pain point standpoint, the one that we hear most often is just not knowing where to start, right? So sometimes the default is to push off getting certain things done. Or like you said, if it's a lot of competing goals, it's wanting to make sure that they're taking that best next step. And they may not know what they don't know. So they're looking for expertise to help with those strategies and ideas, because they really do want to efficiently allocate their resources, and understanding that even if, like you said, they're earning a little bit more or they're feeling a little bit more secure, a lot of these goals may be competing. So that pain point, again, is wanting to make sure that they're doing the best they can, depending on how they may prioritize that. And we'd also say that they may be getting fractured advice as they're starting to do more research or rubbing elbows in different circles, whether that's friends, families, other professionals they associate with. They may not know what is the best next step for themselves. So that is the goals, the pain points that are typical when someone comes to us for the first time wanting to start financial planning.
Yeah, and I think you said that well, and I'll just kind of double down on it's the prioritization of those specific goals, and some people may not know what they should prioritize. So that's where we can help play that role of, helping to frame the conversation on what they should be focusing on, and what can get shifted, lower on that to-do list.
Right.
So let's shift gears a little bit then and talk about the process. How do we actually help people through that?
Well, you kind of alluded to it. We as financial planners have a process, because where it really does start before we get into the nuts and bolts of the finances is those conversations of what truly does matter most to them, right? And also understanding, depending on when they grew up or the lessons that they would have learned and who they would have learned it from, it's really getting their perspective. How do they think and feel about money? Why is money important to them? So it's answers to those questions that are going to help us dig deeper into your key point. How do they prioritize things? If resources are finite and competing, we really do need to do a deeper dive into, look, in a perfect world, we can do all this, but if we can't, where are we getting started? And I'd also say part of that process on the front end of getting to understand them and what they value is also figuring out how they need to be led, what kind of education they need. Are they delegators? Or are they fine to kind of do it on their own? They just need us to hold their hand from time to time. Or, in the Google age, are they information gatherers, or are they more on the camp of just tell me what to do so I can do it? We need to learn how they best make decisions. And that's a big part of our process before then getting into the financials. And that's where I'd maybe turn it back to you. Let's talk about the financials, the specific example of how we'd go about gathering data, or kind of collaborating with them through technology to make sure that we can then take everything we know about them and their financial situation and start that planning process.
Yeah, clearly that's job one, is to make sure that we understand them and where they're coming from, from that personal perspective. And then, yes, we're going to lean on some technology to help gather all of the financial data
Yeah.
beyond the personal, emotional side of things. So we use a financial planning tool called eMoney. There is a client portal that we can share with clients. They can log in, they can start to link outside, bank accounts, 401k, credit cards, mortgage, all of those things that can get housed into one nice clean spot. And it really helps to kind of streamline that initial data gathering process. Now, it's not to say that we strictly only use that technology. If either someone's not comfortable using the tool or just doesn't feel like they're tech savvy enough, we certainly can deal with copies of statements and papers and unopened mail.
Right.
That's not a problem. But we do like to lean on technology when we can, because it does make things a little bit smoother.
Yeah, and I think this tool, as you said, it helps us gather the whole picture, especially because a young accumulator or somebody that's still working, it's more than likely that there are a bunch of different moving parts and a bunch of different counts in different areas. So it becomes that one spot where we can really come together and interactively, even in a meeting, then be able to make sure that we're up to date with information as life throws us many curveballs and situations change, to make sure that we always have that up to date data. But then it's also an interactive tool for us to help them consider new ideas. Again, prioritize goals, and we can interactively do some of that through different scenario planning. And we'll talk about that maybe when we get into the goals. But before we jump into the goals, when we say financial planning and really have a couple or a person that's really charged up about like focusing on their goals and feeling in a good spot, we really think the first step in this process is to make sure that their fundamentals are covered. What do we mean by fundamentals, and what would that entail?
Yeah, it's clearly the maybe the fun part of thinking about goals in general, right? It's what can I do to upgrade to a bigger house with more yard and the woods, and my retirement in the future, and saving for kids' education or buying the next toy. Those are all the funner conversations. But yeah, before we get to that, we want to make sure that they have all of their building blocks in place, right? Do they have an adequate cash reserve that covers 3 to 6 months of their expenses, that God forbid something happens and they're out an income, that they can still continue to live the life they want to live? It's making sure that they have the right amounts and the right types of insurance. Again, same situation. If something bad happens, are you going to be okay? And then again, kind of it's all in the same vein of, if something goes awry, do I have things set up? So it's estate documents. If you have young children, making sure that you have guardians clearly named for them in your wills. It's simple check boxes that we just want to make sure are covered before you start to move on to allocating additional resources to those bigger goals moving forward.
Yeah, and I think you said that really well. That is that safety net that then allows us to kind of focus on prioritizing, as they would have told us at this point in the process, on where their discretionary cash flow should go. So we kind of call it more of the pecking order of savings. And there's a lot that goes into that, but that's where we can focus on the individual components of the individual goals, right? If it's saving more for retirement, where are they saving? Right? Is it into a company employer plan? Is it into their own IRA plan? Should it be Roth? Do they qualify? If they don't, where else can we put it? When it comes to maybe upgrading the house, we do want to think about debt to income ratios, other obligations that they may have. We have formulas that we would follow for affordability. When it comes to kids' college, let's talk about what that really means to them. Is that a portion of it? Is it several years of it? Is it public? Is it private? Is the money in the kid's name, or is it more just earmarked for them? We'd go through calculations on what's called the expected family income, so that you can really start to understand what are you going to be obligated to versus what would be your goals. And I also think when it comes to paying off something like student loan debt, there's some of those trade-offs of, is it better to save and just allow those loans to continue to be paid down slowly over time? Or is the interest rate really something that's not good for your bigger financial plan? And therefore paying it off is really a good idea before you save in other spots. So I really think this goal section is where we would really want to do some interactive planning, making sure we prioritize things, but really get them to see the different scenarios. So when I say seeing the different scenarios, what would that relationship or how would that service really look like for them? 'em?
Yeah. So in that scenario, um, 'cause, you know, we have a young family, and we're looking to using e-money, our planning tool, to really look at those different scenarios in real time. You said it, interactively, start to click on and off those different, what
Hmm.
if Sally went to Penn State? What if she went to a private university? Just seeing those domino effects in real time, we can actually see how it starts to affect the overall plan moving forward, and allows, we hope, that someone can make an informed decision with all of the details in front of them. So beyond that, our services, then the role that we play, right? The initial process is those meetings on the front end, getting to learn more about them, what they're looking to accomplish, their specific goals, and just helping to prioritize that. And then we can kind of step in and actually do all of this planning work on the back end. And then it's those interactive conversations of, here's what we found with the information you provided us. Let's go through these different scenarios. Let's find a few that feel like they
Hmm.
fit, and then actually start to document that specific advice for those specific scenarios, and actually build that to-do list with who is going to do what and by when, so that there is
Right.
accountability both on their end and on our end, that once we come up with these tasks, that they're going to get done. Because that's the worst thing for us, is to do all this work, all this time involved, not just on our end, but their end too. And then feeling like we have this to-do list, and then we check in, a little bit down the line, and nothing actually got accomplished. That is one of the worst feelings for us as planners, to not feel like we're actually impacting their lives. So that accountability is huge for us. And it's having that document, making sure that they can reference it over time. Again, it's when we're looking at planning for accumulators or younger individuals, we view this in a much shorter scale, right? It's 3 to 5 years out of that planning runway, rather than, retirement is typically a much longer time horizon that we're looking to cover. So we know that there's going to have to be adaptability on the fly, and adjustments come maybe more frequently at this stage of life.
Somebody like the Rosens, then let's lay it on the line here. We're talking about a very comprehensive financial planning process that we really want to walk them through. We'll often get the question, how are we compensated? And
Mhm.
not that we can be too specific at this point, right? We'd want to make sure that we would give somebody like the Rosens a proposal on the front end that was very specific to their case. But what is a comprehensive financial planning fee? What would that look like for somebody like the Rosens?
Yep. So you just said it. It's once we go through that initial meeting process, we start to dig through some of the data. We'll give a proposal on what we think that's going to cost, and that's really just based off of time, right?
Hmm.
How much time do we think we're going to put into the meetings, the analysis, the documentation, all of that, and we'll give a clear, flat fee up front. We don't bill like attorneys. We don't bill like certain CPAs, where it's, we're not hitting a button that starts the clock every time we
Right.
start talking to somebody. We want that fee to be clear and transparent. And then if through that process there are investment accounts or assets that they also want us to manage, that is a separate service and a separate fee. There's no commissions, there's no transaction costs. That is a strictly an advisory based fee, an asset management fee that is a percentage of the account moving forward, so that we feel like we're sitting on the same side of the table, that if they're making money, so are we. If the market's going down, they're losing money, so are we.
Right. And that is certainly, you said it well. There are a lot of different pieces of technology out there. We really do feel like asset allocation advice, especially for younger individuals, should be kind of fundamental, right? If
Mhm.
part of the questions of, should I work with a financial planner because they'll tell me whether to buy this stock or that stock, will be rather frank, that's not us. We do believe in asset allocation, and where we get those models or where you choose to invest is completely up to you. But for those that really do want the comprehensive financial planning and are happy to make sure that the investments align with that, then we
Mhm.
certainly are a good fit. So I think in summary, we would say that planning is really important for, younger accumulators or those that are really getting into a phase of life where they have these competing goals. But we would say it's an ongoing relationship. It's not a transaction. You said it very well. Especially when there's longer runways, we think it can actually be to our detriment sometimes to think too far down the road. It's good to see what's out on the horizon, but we're really looking to work with a young couple like the Rosens on what do the next 3 to 5 years look like, acknowledging that especially at that phase of life, many things will change. So it's going to mean checking in multiple times a year, sharing updates with each other, reviewing parts of the plan to make sure they still fit and are relevant, and of course making adjustment when life throws us curveballs. So for the Rosens, let's set a course for those next few years. It's a great next step. And then, of course, we're going to be here to help them navigate the ever evolving phase of life, whatever that brings for them.